The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Concord for exactly 42 years. In all that time, they had learned one painful truth about the universe. They were considered primitives. They were treated like children who had wandered into a room full of adults. The elder races of the galaxy looked at humans the way a king might look at peasants begging for scraps at his table. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the starship Intrepid and watched the stars drift past the main viewport. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray streaks in his dark hair. 20 years he had served in space. 20 years of watching alien species treat his people like they were nothing. His executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, walked up to him with a datapad in her hand. She was younger than him by 15 years, with sharp features and black hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her expression told him the news was not good. "Sir, we have received another rejection from the Concord Council," she said. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the anger underneath. "They have denied our request for defensive weapon permits." Again, Daniel took the datapad and read through the diplomatic language. The words were polite, but the meaning was clear. The Valari Dominion had voted no. The Kreth Assembly had voted no. The Sothani Collective had voted no. Humanity would not be allowed to upgrade its weapons beyond Class 3 plasma systems. 42 years, Daniel said quietly. 42 years of following their rules. 42 years of being good and patient and respectful. And they still treat us like we cannot be trusted with a sharp knife. Maria nodded. The official reason is galactic stability. They say younger species need time to mature before they can handle advanced weapons. The real reason is they want to keep us weak. Daniel handed the datapad back to her. A species that cannot defend itself is a species that has to do what it is told. This was the way of the Galactic Concord. The elder races had built their empires over thousands of years. They had no intention of letting newcomers challenge their power. So they made rules. Rules about weapons. Rules about territory. Rules about trade. And the younger species had no choice but to obey. But what the alien empires did not know was that humanity had been working on something in secret. Something that would change everything. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth, in a facility that did not officially exist, Dr. Catherine Moore stood before the most important machine ever built by human hands. It stretched for over 2 kilometers through an underground tunnel. Rails made of superconducting material ran parallel to each other, disappearing into the darkness ahead. Banks of capacitors lined the walls, ready to release enormous of electrical power. Catherine was a small woman with silver hair and glasses that she was always pushing up her nose. She had spent the last 8 years of her life on this project. She had missed birthdays and holidays and the funerals of people she loved. All for this moment. Her colleague, Dr. Samuel Wright, stood beside her looking at the numbers on his screen. He was a large man with a beard and kind eyes. He had been our partner on this project from the very beginning. "The simulations are complete," Samuel said. "The mathematics all check out. We can accelerate a 1-kilogram projectile to nearly 4% of the speed of light." Catherine let those words sink in. 4% of light speed. That was 12,000 kilometers per second. That was faster than any weapon the Galactic Concord had ever built. Faster than their plasma cannons. Faster than their particle beams. Faster than anything. "And the Concord sensors?" she asked. "Will they detect it?" Samuel smiled. "Their sensors scan for energy signatures. Plasma discharge. Nuclear radiation. Antimatter containment. But our weapon is just magnets and metal. It is so primitive by their standards that they never thought to look for it. To them, kinetic weapons are ancient history. something their ancestors used before they discovered better technology. This was the genius of the railgun. While the alien races had moved on to exotic energy weapons, humanity had taken a different path. They had asked a simple question. What happens if you throw a rock really, really fast? The answer was devastation. Catherine placed her hand on the cold metal of the rail. She could feel a slight vibration from the power systems humming beneath her feet. When do we tell the government? We do not tell them anything yet, Samuel replied. First, we need to test it. We need to know it works before we change the course of human history. 3 weeks later, Captain Daniel Hayes received new orders aboard the Intrepid. The message came through secure channels, encrypted with codes he had never seen before. He read it twice to make sure he understood. We are being diverted to classified coordinates, he told Maria. Full communication blackout starting immediately. No contact with Earth. No contact with other ships. No contact with anyone. What is this about, sir? I do not know. But someone very high up wants us there. And they do not want the Concorde finding out. The Intrepid changed course and headed for the outer edge of the solar system. For 3 days they traveled in silence. Daniel spent the time wondering what could be so important that it required this level of secrecy. When they arrived at the coordinates, he found his answer. A small fleet of human vessels had gathered around a captured asteroid in the belt beyond Mars. Research ships, cargo haulers, military escorts, and one massive construction platform that looked like it had been built in a hurry. A shuttle took Daniel to the platform where he met Admiral Patricia Coleman. She was the highest-ranking officer in the Earth Defense Force, a stern woman in her 60s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many compromises. Captain Hayes, she said, shaking his hand firmly, I have read your service record. You have spent 20 years watching alien species look down on us. How did that feel? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about every sneer from Valari diplomats, every dismissive wave from Kreth commanders, every time he had been told that humans were not ready, not mature enough, not worthy. It felt like being trapped, he said, like knowing you could do more but never being allowed to try. Patricia nodded slowly. And what if I told you we had a way to change that? A way to make them see us as equals. A way to make them respect us. I would ask what the cost is. The Admiral led him to an observation window. Below, the captured asteroid floated in the darkness of space. It was nearly a kilometer across, covered with targeting marks painted in bright colors. The cost, Patricia said, is that once we do this, there is no going back. The Concorde will demand answers. The elder races will see us as a threat. We might be starting a war that will last for generations. Daniel looked at the asteroid. He looked at the strange machinery being assembled nearby. He thought about all the years of humiliation. All the years of being told his species was not good enough. Or, he said quietly, we might be ending the chance of a war before it starts. A species that can defend itself is a species that does not get pushed around. Admiral Coleman smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone about to step off a cliff. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. The weapons platform did not look impressive from the outside. It was a long rectangular box made of gray metal, floating in space like a shipping container that someone had forgotten to deliver. The alien races would have laughed if they had seen it. They would have called it primitive, ugly, worthless. They would have been very wrong. Inside the platform, which the project team had named Thunder, the railgun waited. 2 kilometers of superconducting rails, enough capacitors to power a small city, and a tungsten projectile the size of a soda can, weighing exactly 1 kilogram. Dr. Catherine Moore monitored the systems from her station on the observation platform. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. 8 years of work had led to this moment. 8 years of secret research, hidden budgets, and lies told to keep the alien sensors from noticing what humanity was building. Dr. Samuel Wright stood beside her, checking the numbers one last time. "All systems are green," he said. "Magnetic alignment is perfect. Capacitors are at full charge. We are ready." Captain Daniel Hayes watched from the main observation deck alongside Admiral Patricia Coleman. A dozen other officers stood with them, all of them chosen for their loyalty and their silence. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would either change human history or remain a secret forever. "Target acquisition confirmed," announced one of the technicians. "The asteroid is in position. Range is 300 kilometers. 300 kilometers. In space combat, that was practically touching distance. The Volari plasma cannons could hit targets from 10,000 kilometers away. The Kreth particle beams could reach even farther. But the railgun was different. The railgun did not care about range. At 4% of light speed, a projectile would cross 300 kilometers in about 1/100th of a second. Admiral Coleman looked at Catherine on the screen. "Dr. Moore, you may proceed when ready." Catherine took a deep breath. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. She had dreamed about it. She had worried about it. Now it was here, and her mouth was dry, and her hands wanted to shake. "Beginning final countdown," she said, keeping her voice calm. 10 seconds to firing. Everyone fell silent. The only sounds were the hum of machinery and the soft beeping of instruments. 5 seconds. Daniel Hayes found himself holding his breath. Beside him, Admiral Coleman stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the asteroid through the viewport. 3, 2, 1, firing. Catherine pressed the button. Inside the Thunder platform, something incredible happened. The capacitors released their stored energy in a single massive pulse. Electromagnetic fields grabbed a tungsten projectile and accelerated it down the length of the rails. In less than 2 seconds, the small piece of metal went from standing still to moving at 12,000 kilometers per second. There was no sound in space. No dramatic roar of engines or explosion of propellant. Just a brief flash of light as the projectile left the barrel, surrounded by a halo of plasma from the air that had been trapped in the chamber. The asteroid never had a chance. The projectile covered 300 kilometers in an instant. It struck the center of the rocky mass with the force of a small nuclear bomb. The impact released energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of explosives. The asteroid, which had survived billions of years floating through space, simply came apart. It shattered into millions of pieces that flew outward in an expanding sphere of dust and fragments. For a long moment, no one spoke. Everyone stared at the debris cloud where the asteroid had been. A kilometer of solid rock, destroyed in a fraction of a second by a weapon that was nothing more than magnets and metal. Samuel Wright broke the silence. His voice was shaking. Direct hit. Target completely destroyed. Energy release measured at 15 kilotons equivalent. Catherine added, and that was just a prototype. The full-scale version will be 3 times as powerful. Maybe more. Admiral Coleman turned to face the assembled officers. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Or fear, or both. "What you have just witnessed is classified at the highest level," she said. "You will not speak of this to anyone. Not your families. Not your friends. Not your priests. The existence of this weapon is now humanity's greatest secret." Daniel Hayes was still staring at the debris field. His mind was racing through the implications of what he had seen. The Volari Dominion had the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Their dreadnoughts were considered invincible. Their shields could absorb plasma fire for hours. But shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They were designed to absorb heat and radiation and electromagnetic pulses. They were not designed to stop a solid object moving at relativistic speeds. Nothing was designed to stop that. "Admiral," he said slowly, "how many of these weapons do we have?" "Right now? Just this one. But we are building more. In 6 months, we will have 4 platforms ready for deployment. And the Concorde has no idea?" Patricia shook her head. "Their monitoring systems look for the kinds of weapons they understand. Energy signatures, radiation emissions, exotic particles. Our railgun produces none of those things. As far as the aliens are concerned, this platform is just an ordinary cargo container." Daniel thought about what that meant. For decades, the elder races had kept humanity weak by controlling what weapons they were allowed to have. They had banned nuclear devices. They had restricted plasma weapons. They had forbidden anything that might let humans defend themselves against a determined attack. But they had never thought to ban simple kinetic projectiles. Why would they? In their minds, throwing rocks was something primitive species did before they discovered real technology. It would be like banning spears on a battlefield full of tanks. They had made a mistake. And now humanity had an advantage that no one saw coming. "What happens next?" Daniel asked. "We wait," Admiral Coleman replied. "We build more platforms. We train crews. We prepare for the day when we might need to use this weapon for real." She paused. "And we pray that day never comes." But even as she spoke those words, everyone in the room knew the truth. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. The elder races had maintained their power through force and intimidation for thousands of years. Sooner or later, one of them would push humanity too far. And when that happened, thunder would speak. The officers began to file out of the observation deck, returning to their duties with the weight of secrets pressing down on their shoulders. Daniel stayed behind for a moment, still watching the debris cloud slowly expand. Maria Santos found him there an hour later. She did not ask what he had seen. She did not need to. The look on his face told her everything. "Whatever it is," she said quietly, "it changes things." "Does it not?" Daniel nodded. "It changes everything." He turned away from the viewport and headed for the bridge. The Intrepid had new orders, new coordinates, new missions that would help prepare humanity for what was coming. Behind him, the debris of the destroyed asteroid drifted through the darkness of space. A billion-year-old rock, turned to dust by human ingenuity and desperation. It was just the beginning. 6 months passed and humanity worked with desperate speed. 3 more railgun platforms were built in secret shipyards hidden among the asteroids. Training programs taught selected crews how to operate the weapons. Tactics were developed for combat scenarios that everyone hoped would never happen. And all the while, the Galactic Concorde remained completely unaware. The crisis came from the Volari Dominion, as many had feared it would. The Volari were the most aggressive of the elder races. Their empire covered 300 star systems. Their fleet had never lost a battle in over 2,000 years. They looked at younger species the way a wolf looks at sheep. It started with an announcement. The Volari declared that human colonial rights in the Kepler sector were being canceled. 12 million people lived on those worlds. They had built cities and farms and schools. They had raised children and buried their dead in that soil. And now they were being told to leave. Ambassador Linda Porter stood before the Concorde Council and tried to make the elder races understand. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a voice that could be gentle or sharp, depending on what the moment required. Right now, it was sharp. "The Kepler colonies have existed for 30 years, she said. 12 million humans call those planets home. You cannot simply order them to abandon everything they have built. High Arbiter Vethkal of the Velari Dominion looked down at her from his elevated seat. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that held no warmth. His people had been ruling the stars when humans were still living in caves. "We can order whatever we wish, Ambassador," he said. His voice was cold and dismissive. "The Kepler sector falls within our sphere of influence. Your species was permitted to settle there as a courtesy. That courtesy is now withdrawn. And if we refuse to leave?" Vethkal smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Then you will be removed. The Dominion fleet is more than capable of relocating your colonists. Whether they survive the process depends entirely on how much they cooperate." Linda looked around the council chamber. Representatives from a dozen species sat in their seats, watching in silence. The Krath with their insect-like faces. The Sorthani with their 4 arms and purple skin. Others that humanity had barely learned the names of. None of them spoke in defense of the humans. None of them ever did. "I see," Linda said quietly. "Then I believe we have nothing more to discuss." She left the chamber and sent a message to Earth, using the most secure channel available. The response came within hours. It was 3 words long. Operation Thunderclap authorized. The Velari fleet arrived at Kepler Prime 3 weeks later. 40 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took up positions around the colony world. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek vessels covered in glowing weapon ports, their shields shimmering with barely contained energy. Fleet Commander Zethral transmitted his ultimatum to the surface. "You have 24 hours to begin evacuation. After that, we will commence forced relocation. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." The colonists watched the alien ships from their homes and wondered if this was the end. 12 million people, helpless before a power they could not fight. But then something unexpected happened. The response to the ultimatum came not from Kepler Prime, but from empty space about 50,000 kilometers away. A small human fleet appeared on the Velari sensors. 4 warships and 8 support vessels. And 3 objects that the alien computers identified as simple cargo containers. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, which had been named the flagship of this tiny defensive force. He was calm in a way that surprised even himself. Perhaps it was because he had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. Maria Santos nodded from her station. "Channel open, sir." Daniel spoke clearly. "Fleet Commander Zethral, this is Captain Daniel Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. I am authorized to inform you that any hostile action against Kepler Prime will be considered an act of war against humanity. You are advised to withdraw your forces immediately." The Velari commander's response was immediate. Laughter echoed through the transmission. Then his cold voice followed. "You dare threaten the Dominion? Your primitive fleet is outnumbered 10 to 1. Your weapons cannot even scratch our shields. Stand aside, human, or be destroyed alongside your colonists." Daniel smiled. It was a small smile, tired and a little sad. "I was hoping you would say something like that." He switched to a different channel. "All Thunder platforms, you are weapons-free. Fire at will." The 3 cargo containers opened simultaneously. Inside each one, a full-scale railgun hummed with power. Targeting computers locked onto the Velari flagship, a massive dreadnought that had been the terror of 3 sectors for 200 years. The first railgun fired. The projectile crossed 50,000 kilometers in less than 4 seconds. It struck the Velari flagship at just under 4% of the speed of light. The impact was beyond anything the aliens could have imagined. The flagship shields, designed to absorb energy weapons, did nothing to stop a solid mass moving at relativistic velocity. The tungsten projectile punched through the shields like they were not there. It hit the hull and released energy equivalent to 45,000 tons of explosives. The flagship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, 2 kilometers of advanced alien warship. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. The second and third railguns fired before anyone could react. A heavy cruiser vanished. A destroyer was torn in half by the impact. 3 Velari ships destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Fleet Commander Zethral had just enough time to scream orders at his remaining ships. He told them to scatter. He told them to flee. He told them to report what had happened. Then the 4th shot hit his command vessel, and he never gave another order again. The remaining Velari ships did not try to fight back. They did not try to negotiate. They turned and ran. Their faster-than-light drives engaged, and they disappeared into the darkness of space, leaving behind only debris and silence. On Kepler Prime, 12 million humans watched the battle on their screens. They saw the mighty Velari fleet shattered in less than a minute. They saw the impossible become possible. And then they cheered. They cheered until their voices were raw. They held each other and cried and laughed and could not believe what they had witnessed. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Daniel Hayes felt no joy. He felt only the weight of what had just happened. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in blood and fire. Nothing would ever be the same. Maria Santos approached him. Her face was pale. "Sir, what happens now?" Daniel looked at the debris field where 40 alien ships had once been. "Now everyone knows what we can do. Now everything changes." He was right about that. In the Concord Council Chamber, the footage played on every screen. A dozen species watched in horror as the most powerful fleet in the galaxy was destroyed by a weapon they did not understand. High Arbiter Vethkal stood frozen, his face the color of ash. "What have they done?" he whispered. "What in the name of all the stars have they done?" Ambassador Linda Porter stepped forward, her expression calm. "We defended ourselves, High Arbiter. Something we should never have needed to do in the first place." The galaxy had just met humanity's thunder, and every alien empire froze in fear. News of the Battle of Kepler Prime spread across the galaxy faster than light itself could travel. Within days, every species in the Concord had seen the footage. Every military leader had watched it again and again, trying to understand what they were seeing. Every government had called emergency meetings to discuss what it meant. The conclusions were the same everywhere. They were unanimous, and they were terrifying. On the Kreth homeworld, a planet of endless deserts and crystalline cities, Supreme Commander Thrullax addressed his war council. The Kreth were an insectoid species with hard shells and compound eyes but could see in every direction at once. They were considered the finest tactical minds in the galaxy, and right now they were scared. "The human weapon operates on principles we barely understand," Thrullax said. His voice clicked and buzzed in the way of his kind. "Pure kinetic force, accelerated to speeds we thought were impossible outside of laboratory conditions. Our shields are designed to absorb energy. They cannot stop solid matter moving at that velocity." One of his admirals leaned forward. "Can we develop countermeasures? Some way to stop these projectiles?" "Perhaps, in time. But we would need years to even understand the technology. Decades to create effective defenses. And the humans are already building more weapons. They will not give us that time." Similar conversations happened across every corner of the galaxy. The Srathani Collective ran computer simulations that showed their entire fleet could be destroyed in less than 5 minutes. Their 4 armed generals argued about whether to strike first before humanity grew too strong, but no one could agree on a plan that did not end in disaster. The Velari Dominion recalled every ship from their border systems, pulling their fleet back to protect their homeworld. The shame of their defeat burned like acid in their hearts, but they were not foolish enough to try again. Not yet. Even the ancient Calveth, a species so old that they had stopped concerning themselves with younger races millennia ago, began paying attention. They watched the footage with their ancient eyes and wondered if they had made a mistake by ignoring the humans for so long. On Earth, the mood was different. People celebrated in the streets. They waved flags and sang songs and told each other that humanity had finally proven itself. After 42 years of being treated like children, they had shown the galaxy what they could do. But in the halls of power, the celebrations were more quiet. The leaders who knew the truth understood that winning one battle was not the same as winning a war. Admiral Patricia Coleman addressed the United Nations Assembly in New York. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from every nation on Earth, all of them waiting to hear what came next. For 42 years, we have been treated as second-class citizens of the galactic community, Patricia said. Her voice was strong and clear. We have been denied weapons. We have been denied territory. We have been denied the respect that every intelligent species deserves. That ends today. She paused and looked out at the assembled leaders. But let me be clear about something. This is not a declaration of conquest. We have no desire to dominate anyone. We do not want an empire. We simply want what every species deserves. The right to defend ourselves. The right to determine our own future. The right to be treated as equals. The speech was broadcast across human space. It was translated into dozens of alien languages. And it forced every government in the galaxy to face a question they had never needed to ask before. What do you do when the primitives suddenly become dangerous? The Concord Council called an emergency session. Ambassador Linda Porter attended, but this time she did not come alone. A squad of Marines in powered armor walked beside her. Their weapons were visible. Their faces were hard. It was a subtle message, but no one in the chamber missed it. High Arbiter Vethkal spoke first. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. The Valari Dominion demands reparations for the unprovoked attack on our fleet. We demand the immediate destruction of all human kinetic weapons. We demand that the humans responsible for this atrocity be handed over for punishment. Linda did not even let him finish. You demand nothing, she said. Her voice was ice. Your fleet was threatening 12 million civilians when it was destroyed. By any reasonable reading of galactic law, you committed an act of war. We simply defended ourselves. This is outrageous. The Concord must take action against this threat. The Concord, said a new voice, must recognize reality. Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Krelix of the Kreth Assembly. The insectoid diplomat stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of the chamber. The humans have demonstrated a weapons capability that makes our existing power structures meaningless, Krelix said. We can either adapt to this new reality, or we can destroy ourselves trying to resist it. Those are our only choices. Whispers ran through the chamber. It was unprecedented for a Kreth representative to speak against Valari interests. The political alliances that had held the galaxy together for centuries were cracking before everyone's eyes. Linda seized the moment. Humanity is not seeking to overthrow the Concord. We believe in peaceful coexistence. We are willing to work with any species that treats us with respect. She pulled out a datapad and transmitted a document to every representative in the chamber. This is our proposal for a new relationship between humanity and the Concord. Full membership with equal voting rights. An end to the weapons restrictions that have kept younger species weak. Mutual defense agreements based on respect instead of fear. High Arbiter Vethkal slammed his hand on his podium. This is blackmail. You cannot threaten your way into power. We are not threatening anyone, Linda replied calmly. We're simply stating facts. Humanity has the ability to defend itself. We have proven that. Now we are asking to be treated as equals. What happens next is up to all of you. The debate that followed lasted for hours, then days, then weeks. Representatives argued and shouted and made speeches that went nowhere. Old alliances were tested. New ones began to form. The Kreth announced their support for the human proposal. The Shorthani remained neutral, but stopped speaking against it. Smaller species that had always been afraid of the elder races began to see humanity as a possible protector. Only the Valari Dominion refused to accept the new order. They withdrew from the Concord entirely, retreating to their core systems with promises of revenge. But even they did not dare to attack. On the Intrepid, Captain Daniel Hayes received news of the diplomatic developments with mixed feelings. He stood on the bridge and watched the stars, thinking about what they had done and what it meant. Maria Santos found him there, as she often did these days. "The Concord has agreed to most of our terms," she said. "Full membership, equal rights, an end to the weapons restrictions. I heard. We won, sir. We actually won." Daniel shook his head slowly. "We won a battle. We scared them into giving us what we wanted. But fear is not the same as respect. And scared people do desperate things." He turned to look at her. "This is not over, Maria. The Valari are planning something. The other species are still afraid of us. We have changed the galaxy, but we have not made it safe." "Not yet," Maria nodded. She understood. Victory was just the beginning. The hard part was still to come. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Kepler Prime. 5 years since the first human railgun fired and changed everything. The galaxy was a different place now, and humanity had found its footing among the stars. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the observation deck of the carrier Independence, watching the stars drift past the viewport. The massive ship was the pride of Earth's fleet, carrying not just conventional weapons, but also 6 railgun platforms in its hangar bays. It was a symbol of how far humanity had come. His hair was grayer now than it had been 5 years ago. The weight of command had added lines to his face. But his eyes were still sharp, still watching, still ready. "Quite a view," said a familiar voice behind him. Daniel turned to see Captain Maria Santos approaching. She wore her own insignia now, commanding her own vessel. The nervous young officer he had known on the Intrepid had become a confident leader in her own right. "Maria, congratulations on the promotion." "Thank you, sir. I am still getting used to having my own ship." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In the distance, visible through the viewport, a mixed fleet of human and Kreth vessels conducted joint training exercises. 5 years ago, such cooperation would have been unthinkable. Now it was routine. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Maria asked. "Revealing the railgun when we did. We could have waited longer, built up more forces before showing our hand." Daniel thought about the question. He had asked it to himself many times over the years. The Valari forced our hand at Kepler Prime, but even if they had not, I think we would have had to reveal it eventually. Secrets do not stay secret forever. Better to show our strength on our own terms than be discovered when we were not ready. The new order that emerged from those chaotic first months had not been easy to build. The Galactic Concord still existed, but it had been fundamentally changed. Humanity now held a permanent seat on the Council with full voting rights. The weapons restrictions that had kept younger species weak for so long had been abolished. A new system of mutual defense agreements had replaced the old hierarchy of domination. Not everyone was happy with these changes. The Valari Dominion had never returned to the Concord. They had retreated to their core systems and sealed their borders. Reports from intelligence sources spoke of massive military construction projects. new shipyards, new weapons research. The Valari had not forgotten their humiliation, and they were planning something. But the other elder races had mostly adapted to the new reality. The Kreth had become humanity's closest allies, their practical nature recognizing the value of partnership with a rising power. The Sortheni maintained cautious friendship. Even the ancient Calvith had reached out, offering to share knowledge in exchange for access to human engineering principles. Trust, real trust, was still being built. But progress was being made. On Earth, the railgun program had evolved far beyond its original form. The Thunder platforms that had destroyed the Valari fleet were now considered outdated, replaced by smaller, faster, more powerful weapons. Human warships carried railguns as standard equipment. Defense platforms protected every colony. The technology that had once been humanity's desperate secret was now the foundation of their security. The Dr. Catherine Moore had received every scientific honor that Earth could offer. She had declined most of them, preferring to continue her research. Her hair was completely white now, and she needed a cane to walk, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Her current project was classified, but rumors suggested she was working on something that would make the original railgun look like a toy. "What do you think comes next?" Maria asked, breaking the comfortable silence on the observation deck. Daniel considered the question. For 42 years, humanity had been focused on survival, on proving themselves, on earning the right to exist among the stars. Now they had achieved those things, and new questions were emerging. "That is the real challenge, is it not?" he said. "For so long, we were fighting to be accepted. Now we have to decide what kind of power we want to be. And what kind is that?" Daniel turned to look at her. "The kind that remembers what it felt like to be weak. The kind that protects those who cannot protect themselves. The kind that helps other species instead of dominating them." He paused. "The kind that hopefully never has to fire another railgun in anger." It was a noble goal. Whether humanity could achieve it remained to be seen. Power changed people. It changed nations. It changed entire species. The history of the galaxy was filled with stories of young races that had risen to prominence and then become the very tyrants they had once opposed. Daniel was determined that humanity would be different. But he also knew that determination alone was not enough. It would take constant effort, constant vigilance, constant choice to be better than the easy path of domination and fear. Ambassador Linda Porter, now the senior human representative to the Galactic Concord, had expressed it well in a speech she gave on the anniversary of the Battle of Kepler Prime. "We did not build the railgun because we wanted power," she had said. "We built it because we wanted to survive. We wanted our children to grow up without fear. We wanted to be free. Those are still our goals. Power is just a tool. What matters is how we use it." The Independents received new orders later that day. A diplomatic mission to a distant sector where a young species was having trouble with aggressive neighbors. Nothing that required weapons, just a show of presence. A reminder that the galaxy had changed and bullying the weak was no longer acceptable. Daniel took his place on the bridge and gave the order to engage the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched into lines and then vanished as the ship leaped across the light years. Behind them, Earth continued to spin in the darkness, home to a species that had started with nothing and fought its way to the stars. A species that had been dismissed as primitives and had refused to accept that judgment. A species that had looked at the impossible and found a way. The first human railgun had fired 5 years ago, and every alien empire had frozen in fear. But fear was just the beginning. What came after, the treaties and alliances and partnerships, the slow building of trust across species, the choice to use power for protection rather than conquest, that was the real achievement. The story of humanity among the stars was still being written. There would be more challenges ahead, more crises, more moments when the easy path of violence seemed tempting. But for now, at least, they were moving in the right direction. Admiral Daniel Hayes watched the stars return to normal as the Independence dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a new system. A small world hung in the viewport, blue and green and fragile, home to a species that had never met humans before. A species that was about to learn that they were not alone in the universe. He smiled. It was a good smile, warm and hopeful. "Open a channel," he said. "Let us introduce ourselves." The story continued, one star at a time, one friendship at a time, one choice at a time. Humanity had proven it could destroy. Now it was proving something far more important. It could also build. And that made all the difference.